1,600 people all over the world about their experience during the confinement and lockdown. And of course, as we expect, there was a number of people who had a very tragic experience, either because they lost a dear one or were very sick themselves, or because they were in state of deprivation, or simply because of very difficult to bear spiritual, psychological hardship, could not bear the loneliness, which is known when it's undesired loneliness as compared to wished for solitude in a hermitage, which is completely different experience. So this undesired loneliness has very adverse effects on mental and physical health. So there was about 15% of people who had a very negative experience. But strangely enough, and a friend of mine who was a journalist said this is now, you can't say that in the press, but more than half had actually a quite positive experience of reconnection with dear ones. You know, people say we should slow down, so they definitely slow down. And for those who were lucky to be confined in natural environment, a very strong sense of reconnection with nature. So altogether, this more silent voice of those who got a quite positive experience. And about the sense of community, when they analyzed their testimonies, what they said, in those 1,600 people, they analyzed the semantic of their testimony. And very interestingly, contrary to what some might have believed, they used much more the expression like we and our rather than I and mine, compared to a sample of online chat or things like that. So in a sense, there was, even though for understandable reasons, we maintain a physical distance and sense some extent isolation, there was a sense also of common humanity and shared sort of adversity that we face together. So that's sort of, in a way, encouraging. And also, it also shows that, if government can take some drastic measures and if citizens are some sort of ready to follow, then if we could apply that to the main challenge of our time, which is climate change and all the degradation of the biosphere, then we could get somewhere. So that leads us to how all these relate. This really seems more to be part of outer freedom, the freedom to expression, the freedom of movement, freedom of not being impose unnecessary suffering, or to have to adopt to beliefs that we don't believe in, all kinds of things that comes with totalitarian systems where the individual is a pawn and cannot express any level of individual freedom. And also there are the lack of outer freedom when we are overwhelmed by material challenges, not being able to feed our kids for the next few days, or to face epidemics, or to face conflict or warfare. So there's many circumstances in which one is deprived of outer freedom. So outer freedom, of course, is something that should be sought, that is worth it. That's the ideal of freedom and democracy. And this is the good side of individualism. That is, individual is not a pawn that can be used as an instrument, but is someone who has the right to pursue what that person deems most desirable or worthy accomplishment to pursue in life. So, and the other dark side of individualism is is everything for oneself. I mean, just everything revolves around oneself, and the whole outer world becomes either an instrument to facilitate our own interest or a potential adversary. And so there's a dramatic split between self and others in an instrumental way, And that leads to a lose-lose situation, making oneself miserable and everyone else miserable around. So the pursuit of selfish happiness is a lose-lose situation, while conversely, if our mind is filled with benevolence, with spirit of cooperation, of looking forward to increase the well-being of others and actively relieve suffering, then of course he does so, which is the benefit of others. At the same time, it turns out to be one of the best way to flourish oneself. So it becomes a win-win situation. But as you can see, we speak of selfishness, altruism, sense of common humanity. All those are attitudes, mental states. And so that's where we come to the notion of inner freedom, which is not at all some kind of luxury or a secondary thing, which has very little effect. In fact, it has a huge effect on the way we perceive the world, the way we relate with others, the way we feel ourselves deep within at every moment that passes by. Now, if we look within at the depth of yourself, what do you find there? I was very struck once when I heard someone said, when I look within, I find sadness deep within. What can you say? It is very sad indeed. And you cannot just give some casual advice because it's something very deep and existential. So in a way, someone who finds, this kind of anxiety or sadness or possibly sometimes anger, when that person looks at the very depth of what that person thinks may be the depth of their mind, and then you see, it may seem that we are deprived of some kind of freedom because we cannot get rid of that on the spot. So therefore, we are the slave of this sadness, this anxiety, or this anger. But still, if we think in terms of the experience of contemplatives over thousands of years, there's something even much deeper than that. That's definitely not colored by any of those mental poisons, such as hatred, jealousy, greed, obsession, even anxiety, despair, and so forth, which is the basic nature of consciousness, which is just knows, like this luminous faculty, that luminous in the sense that it lights up our inner world and the outer world, our perceptions, how do we hear, we see. All that is possible because of this basic cognitive faculty of the mind, without which we'll be like a stone and with zero cognitive faculty. So that luminous faculty is something that is much deeper in a way than joy and sorrows, love and hatred, because it's what allows all that. So, and also to have this fundamental nature, it cannot be tainted by any of those. Otherwise, it will be, if all our thoughts were tainted by hatred, then whatever we will look at, whatever we'll see, we'll see it with hatred. It will be like if we put a yellow filter on the torchlight, then everything we look at is yellow. But light itself is actually not changed by what it lights up. If we light up a heap of garbage, light doesn't become dirty. If we light up a heap of gold, light doesn't become costly. It just reveals what is there. So in that sense, it is not modified by what it lights up. In the same way, the basic consciousness is not modified by the content, what populates the mental or inner mental landscape, whether it's a chain reaction of thoughts of jealousy or greed, or it's a chain reaction of thought of loving kindness and benevolence, or it's just a state of peace. Those are the different landscape, or say whether it's a blue sky or a sky filled with the thunder clouds, but the space, sky, doesn't become modified by any amount of clouds, any amount of lightning, any amount of rain, and is not improved in itself when there's a completely fine weather. The sky is not degraded when it's filled with all kinds of things, even smoke. It's simply that there are things within it which have come from causes and conditions, which are construct, we call that mental construct, that may sometimes invade our mental space, and to the point that we are completely under their power. So that's what we may call lack of inner freedom, when we are the slave or the toy of automatic chain reaction thinking. One thought gives rise to 2, to 4, to 8, to 16, and the whole mind is filled up with this sort of discursive thoughts. Why me? Why not me? And that builds up, and soon we have totally lost control of our own mind. So that's what we call lack of inner freedom. So inner freedom is not, contrary to what we might sometimes very naively think, is to do whatever comes through our mind. In fact, I heard someone, a young person on the British radio, saying precisely that for me, freedom would be to do everything that comes to my mind without anyone having to say anything about it. That means complete, go for it. But in fact, such a person will be the slave of every single thought that pops up in the mind. Like we give in Buddhism this example of the grass at the mountain top. The wind sometimes blows, there's a lot of wind on the mountain pass. Sometimes wind blows like this, the grass goes like this. Then the wind goes like that, the grass bends like that. So it's just constantly bending wherever the wind goes. That's not freedom. So in the same way, people think, oh, then it means we have to control our mind. Like put the mind in shackles, which is, of course, don't we lose freedom doing so? So I think that there's a confusion there between what it is to be the master of our own mind and freedom. Actually, they absolutely go together. And the good image for that is that of a sailor. A sailor at ship, at sea, suppose a sailor has a sailboat, and he or she will say, okay, I'm in favor of free navigation, freedom of navigation. That means I would let the boat go wherever it wants, wherever the winds and the currents takes the boat, and I would not going to touch the helm. So that's what happens is usually a shipwreck. I mean, you'll soon find some rocks or something and finish with the ship and yourself. So freedom for the sailor is to take the helm, to rig the sails, and to navigate to the island or the destination that he or she has chosen. So to have the freedom to reach wherever that person has the aspiration to go. So freedom comes with mastering the ship. And so not be like the mind like a restless monkey, but the mind like we can use the mind in a flexible way to generate the mental state that will be the most conducive to flourishing for ourselves and for others. So that's something worth to do. We don't want to let the mind create the whole world of dissatisfaction, frustration, hatred, obsession, nagging jealousy, burning hatred, and so forth. So that's, of course, I mean, suppose you would have done a seminar this Sunday morning saying we guarantee that at the end of it, you will be 100% more jealous and obsessed. And who will have subscribed? I'm not sure. You would have found a lot of customers or amateurs. So, but if we say, okay, we'll try to cultivate more loving kindness together to have a more sort of solidarity and so improve, the quality of human relation, which is at the heart of sense of flourishing, then people say, oh, that sounds quite interesting. So we know that there are certain mental factors that when we are under the sway of these mental factors, there's a deep sense of dissatisfaction, something wrong, something that is not worth pursuing, that is, we become addicted in a way to the causes of suffering. So inner freedom is not just a little luxury. And even Gandhi said that the degree of outer freedom depends on the inner freedom. Because if everyone is under the sway of those mental toxins, society will never function properly. We will be constantly in conflict with each other, whether it's within society or with other countries or other religion or other races or any. So this lack of having a free mind will translate into also lack of inner freedom, because we'll run into action and words that bring suffering upon everyone. So there's clearly not a secondary factor, but something very profound and very essential. So what are then the obstacles to inner freedom? Among those obstacles, one of them is to be delusion. When the mind is confused, we wish to avoid suffering, but it seems that we are running to the causes of suffering. We would like to find some kind of well-being and happiness, but we turn our back to happiness, so we are confused. So then, of course, it's very difficult to get out of that, and we lack the freedom of progressing towards sense of flourishing. And so there's also what my friend, the Swiss philosopher Alexandre Jolien, used often the Greek term akrasia. Akrasia is that we know what is good for us and good for others, but somehow we can't get ourselves to do it. And he used to give the examples of he wanted to lose weight. So he went to a bookstore and got 5 books on how to lose weight and took them back home and put the book next to him on the sofa and watched TV eating French fries. So that doesn't help. So it's like leaving all the doctor's prescription by the pillow. So this kind of thing that we know deep within something, and we just can't get ourselves to do it. So in Buddhist terms, it's one of the 3 aspects of laziness. Buddhist teaching speaks of the most common laziness, which is to want to do as little as possible, to avoid any kind of endeavor and hard work. We know all about that. The second one is premature discouragement. I mean, we say, oh, no, that's not for me. All this thing about, trying to make sustained efforts to become a better person. I'm not able to do that. Meditation, I tried, it just doesn't work. And so we try a little bit, 5 minutes, and then it doesn't work, so we give up. So it's like giving up the race before crossing the starting line because we don't want to do the sustained efforts. And some people resent effort. And especially in our days, in our modern times, there's some kind of aversion to effort. Everything should be easy. We'll make it easy for you. And of course, this is something boring and like, bureaucratic formalities. Well, it doesn't seem they're making them easier, but that would be nice. But if it's just to become a better person, there's no such thing as the secret of becoming a good person or the secret of happiness in 5 points and 3 weeks. It doesn't work. There's no secret. It's not easy. It takes whole life, but it's worth doing. And it's more than 5 points. It's a whole sort of way of life. And so why not? Because what changed very fast and easy way is probably not a real change. It's like cosmetic change. Real change, it's like growing a field. It takes time to prepare the field, to sow the seeds, to watch what's coming out, to clear the weeds and to protect the crop, and finally to harvest the crop and store the grain and transform the grain into flour and then into bread and so forth. So, of course, it takes time and it takes effort, but why not? It's just worth doing. So this kind of acrasia or this kind of laziness is an obstacle to inner freedom. There's also an element of sometimes addiction, and it's not just addiction to, alcohol or substances, or it could be emotional addiction. It could be addiction to our habitual tendencies. And often we are addicted to what causes suffering. And here it's very interesting that there is a lot of very incredible research on that corroborates also what the Buddhist contemplative has been trying to understand about addiction. There's a friend of mine called Kent Berridge, and we had one of those minor life meetings on addiction, on craving, desire, craving, and addiction. And he is the one of the researcher that found a very important difference between a sense of experiencing pleasure at doing something, or taking a glass of something that gives you pleasure at in the beginning, or any pleasurable sensation, and wanting something. So he found that those are different networks in the brain. So say you taste something that create addiction, let's say a substance, but it could be any other kind of addiction. So in the beginning, it gives some pleasure. So you want to repeat that. So, but the experience of pleasure is very labile. It's a very transient. And in the brain, it doesn't last. And also we know from experience, it doesn't last. So pleasure lasts for some time, then it goes away, it becomes neutral, sometimes aversive. If you eat too much of a good thing, you feel sick. If you take a hot shower after walking in the snow, it's wonderful, but imagine 24 hours in the hot shower. If you listen to beautiful music, you might want to listen it a few times in a row, but if you had to listen day and night, it becomes a torture. So pleasurable sensations do change. So you can just rely on them to build a sense of flourishing and happiness. This is a different continuum. But what builds up when you repeat those pleasurable sensations is another network in the brain that makes you want something. And then when that builds up, is much more stable. That means you keep on wanting something. And a point comes when you want something very strongly and you can't resist, yet it's no more giving you a sense of satisfaction. So you may, in the addiction, desperately want something that actually you feel disgusted by, and that often happens. So that's important to know, because when we look at Buddhist psychology or any other psychology, this is also the buildup of tendencies, habitual tendencies, that make us continue to do things even we know that they mostly bring us suffering and no satisfaction. So we need to try to disentangle ourselves from this. So that's what the pursuit of inner freedom can be at the level of our habits. But if we think of habits and our tendencies, our traits, actually, of course, there is to some extent, some of them are inherited genetically. We are more predisposed to be short-tempered or kind. But this just like the master plan. When you build a house, you draw a plan, but you may build it differently. So we know that we can change. It takes time. It's not just moods and fleeting emotion. We can change with time. We become a better person, become more free from those mental poisons. So this happened thought after thought, emotion after emotion. So the idea is to successfully deal with some emotional arising or some thoughts of anger or whatever that can build up and become a full-fledged hatred. When it starts, just like it's easier to deal with the spark than with a full-fledged forest fire, because it's too late. Then we have to call the fireman and all that, while just dealing with the spark is very simple and easy. But that needs to be very attentive and aware of what's going on with one's mind. So we need the sort of the gatekeeper of mindfulness. Here is a thought of, animosity. Why me? Well, why did he say that to me? Why did he do that to me? Aha, attention, be careful, because that thoughts will proliferate and invade your mind, and then you are no more in control, and then you see everything as negative and 100% undesirable or hateable. So that's really lack of freedom. So if we want to slowly get to a state where the mind is in a free state, where thought may come, but they don't have an impact, I mean, like in terms of negative and suffering, they are more like a bird passing through the sky that leaves no trace. That state of freedom comes with experience, cultivation. And that's actually the meaning of what the word we use as meditation. In Sanskrit, bhavana means to cultivate. And in Tibetan, gom means to become more familiar with something. So it could be cultivate loving kindness, or become more familiar with how your mind works. What is the nature of mind? What is the nature of awareness behind the screen of all these thoughts, the clouds of thoughts or the whirlpool of thoughts? Behind that, there's this clear space of pure awareness, but we're not familiar with it, even it's always there. So that process slowly makes us a free person. And one of my teachers said, enlightenment is actually ultimate freedom from ignorance, from delusion, and of course from all the mental poisons, what are the 5 main ones, like animosity, desire, attachment, lack of discernment, envy, jealousy, and pride or arrogance, and all the 84,000 others, various shades or nuances of those mental poisons. All that we can achieve ultimate freedom from that. And so in Tibetan, the words Buddha, Sangye. Sang means to clear, everything that needs to be clear. And Gye is like the flower of the qualities is fully bloom. So there's no more mixture of light and shadows. The shadows have all given place to pure light of wisdom, of compassion, which spontaneously arise from wisdom, like the rays spontaneously arise from the sun. So we may describe enlightenment as ultimate freedom. It's one of the qualities, at least, of Buddhahood and enlightenment. Complete freedom from ignorance, from bewilderment, from confusion, all the veils created by afflictive mental state and the veils upon what is to be known, the 2 main veils, have been dispelled. So that's ultimate freedom. So now, for that, we need a favorable condition. So we could speak of an ecology of inner freedom. So first of all, of course, the ecology means, in Greek, it means the home. So our home is our environment. So it could be a physical environment. It could be a human environment. So physical environment, well, of course, ideally, we should be able to cultivate and maintain inner freedom in any environment, whether it's a traffic jam at Wall Street or sitting in a beautiful mountain or in a forest. But as beginners, obviously, it's easier to cultivate this inner freedom if we are in a serene place rather than in the middle of the stock market or in the traffic jam somewhere. So we need, as beginners, to gather the favorable condition so that this wisdom, compassion, and inner freedom can bloom. So in that sense, a place which does not too much disruption, that doesn't fuel, attraction and aversion, strong grasping or strong animosity. So either a natural place or a place within our own environment where we can be quiet for a while and have time and opportunity to cultivate those qualities. And in terms of the human ecology or environment, we should try to befriend people who are helpers on the path, not those who drag us back to being overwhelmed by our mental poison. So a friend in good, a friend for goodness. That's why in Buddhism, the name of Sangha, it actually means virtuous community, those who help each other while traveling along the path, instead of slowing us down or taking us in the wrong path. So that's very important. Now, in terms of practice, when we do retreats and like that, there's a lot of description in the text of the ecology or the description of the places which are conducive to different kinds of practices. For instance, if we want to practice like something like shamatha, the inner calm, it is advisable to go to some forest where everything is peaceful. The mind can be settled. If we want to practice more like a deeper insight, like something we call vipassana, then it might be good, or watch the nature of mind, to go to a very open space with big sky, like top of a mountain or somewhere very vast, where the mind becomes vast and the mind can mingle with the vastness, and therefore see the vastness of the mind is also see the luminosity, the emptiness of the mind. So like that. Now, when we want to work with our emotions and purposely work with them, that strong emotion, we might go to a sort of frightful place, like a gorge with a lot of very powerful mountain river, and then wild animals and all kinds of little bit frightening, so that we can experience with our emotions. So there's all these things described in the teachings, and also how the place maybe should be open to the east when the sun rises, should have something on the back, the north of a mountain, in the front there should be a river. So there's all this description you find of places which are nice for doing retreats. So of course we don't all have the opportunity to do such retreat, but it's important. Now, again, if we want to cultivate inner freedom, we need this notion of cultivation. Things don't come so easily. Things don't come just by themselves. We don't know how to read and write as we were born, or to play the piano, and we need to learn that. And in the same way, we were not born knowing how to play chess or badminton or rugby or anything. So why should the basic human qualities of loving kindness, inner freedom, attentive presence, all those resilience, inner peace, just be at the best of that, on top of their most optimal state, simply because we just want to be so. This will be contrary to everything of experience of what we learn in life. So we need to cultivate those things. Excuse me. So just give me 1 second. I'm coming back. Yes. So we need to cultivate all these conditions. So that's the notion of cultivation of effort. And as I mentioned, nowadays, people are sort of aversive to effort. It's very strange because I don't know why. Everything comes to cultivation in our life. So that this easygoing stuff is a bit suspicious. Now, also, so that means this is all spiritual practices about that. It's not about, there are many ways to describe the path to Buddhahood. Some of them say we are actually taking the seed of Buddhahood and make it grow, and it becomes full-fledged Buddhahood. But many other schools of thinking within Buddhism think, okay, we have this Buddha nature. It's like a nugget of gold that might be, within this within a piece of rock, or it might be fallen in the mud, forgotten for a long time. But gold is gold. No, it's not nothing to be improved. And we just need to remove what's masked the gold, make it shine, but we are not making it better. We are just removing what's prevent us to see the gold as it is. So that idea of Buddha nature present within every sentient beings, like sesame, like all in every sesame seed, is a very important concept. And among the 3 turnings of the wheel of the teaching of the Buddha, the teaching based on the Tathagata, the Buddha nature, belongs to the 3rd episode of the teaching of the turning of the wheel. There are 10 sutras which deal with the absolute truth and with Buddha nature. So in that case, the base or the beginning, the foundation of the path is the fact that we have this Buddha nature. And then this is also when we say we feel compassion, we feel some good heart. It's actually some kind of like a little bit shining of coming from that Buddha nature. Then it is obscured by outside temporary obscuration. So the path is not about creating the perfection of Buddhahood. It's about removing all that mask the Buddha nature, like the sky and the sun in the sky has always been there, shining, full-fledged. Sky is completely pure, but it could be obscured for 1,000 years by cloud that never goes away, but doesn't change the sky. It's simply that the obscuration has prevented from seeing it. So we say that the path is removing those veils. And that's what needs practice, that needs effort, that needs perseverance, and that needs to go step by step. And then the fruit is the actualization of the ground, of the what we have. It means the full actualization of the Buddha nature. So in that sense, it is recovering our natural freedom that has been temporarily taken away from us by our mental construct, our long-term habits that we build in this life, and according to Buddhist teaching, in many, many lifetimes of being confused and bewildered, and actually contradicting our aspiration to be free of suffering by our action and our words and our thoughts, which has relentlessly built up suffering. So in a way, to give up the causes of suffering, what sometimes we call renunciation, is not to deprive ourselves from what is really good in life. That would be really stupid. Is to stop and give, getting, relent again and again, getting in the cause of suffering. Now, we cannot, want not to be burned and at the same time keep our hand in the fire. So renunciation, understood in a good way, is to renounce the cause of suffering. So there's nothing that we give up which is good. It's like a bird flying away from its cage. No, it's not renouncing the cage, it's just free from the cage, and it can fly in the blue sky. So in that sense, if we do cultivate this inner freedom, and then there is some result, what we could call the harvest of inner freedom. And that's, if we say freedom from the exacerbated sense of self-importance, the harvest is unconditional benevolence and compassion. Like there's no one who is excluded from our heart. I mean, we cannot, of course, realistically think that we will bring the happiness to the whole, every city, every person in the world, and every animal among the 8 million other species who are our co-citizens in this world. But it doesn't require sort of huge complication to say, I wish that every sentient being find happiness and the cause of happiness. I wish that every sentient being is free from suffering and the cause of suffering. So that wish can be unconditional. we move away from saying, okay, I wish happiness for those who are dear to me, who treat me well, and maybe a few others, but no, forget about the other guys, especially my neighbors or something. So again, it doesn't mean that we will wake up in the morning saying I'm going to change the whole world, but why not? It is not excluding anybody, even the most bloody dictator. We don't wish that tyrant or dictator to succeed, of course, because it's a huge cause of suffering, but we can wish, may the hatred, the animosity, the greed, the cruelty, the indifference that makes that person a bloody dictator be removed from that person's mind. Well, that's an altruistic wish, that's a compassionate wish, and that's a wish that aims at removing suffering. So we can do that. It's not stupid compassion. It's very smart compassion. So in that way, nobody is included. So that's unconditional benevolence. So some people say, oh, that's not realistic. You have to take care of your kids and all that. Yes, of course. Those who are the sun shines on everything without discrimination. But if someone is very near from the sun, gets more heat and warmth and light. But it's not at the cost of not shining on others. The sun doesn't have to narrow down its rays so that it can shine very well on one person. Actually, if the sun was doing that, even that person will get less light and less warm, because it will be just like a tiny sun shining to a pinhole, and that will not work. So the more this compassion and altruistic love is unconditional, actually, the more you will also love better those who are close to you in this life for many, many reasons. So in that sense, this is again freedom from selfishness, freedom from excessive self-centeredness. And so that's one of the harvests of achieving inner freedom. There's also a harvest about a change of attitudes towards death. We will, in the beginning, we feel that we are frightened by death, like a deer that's taken in a trap. And then later on, we are like a peasant, a farmer who has done everything that's possible to put the right seeds, to care for them, to watch the crop. And then maybe some years it will work fine. Some years there will be, hail or insects, but there's no regret. And then finally, when you meet death, it's like meeting a friend. Not that you are delighted to die. That would not be quite right. But that, okay, that's one moment. It has come. I prepared that through my practice. So hello. So like that. So that's freedom. And there are many such things. And also, if we have inner freedom, you will naturally behave in a more ethical and moral way, because you will not be under the sway again of the promotion, the relentless promotion of self-interest and so forth. So in a way, it's that you will easily accomplish the twofold benefit of others and yourself. So that's why, inner freedom, of course, is not just a magic bullet, but it's one of the chief qualities of achieving awakening, enlightenment. We describe so many qualities. We speak of the 25 qualities of the ultimate aspect of Buddhahood, the Dharmakaya, and so forth. But inner freedom is a quite simple concept that really is the heart of this, what we should look for while progressing on the spiritual path. So there's a long way to go, and a lot of blah blah from my side without having realized any of this, but I heard that from my great teachers, as Begonia mentioned, Kangyo Rinpoche, the Okense Rinpoche, so there's the Dalai Lama. So even though, at least, I have no such any qualities myself, but I heard so many wonderful teachings. So I try my best to convey a few of them without distorting them too much. And so in that sense, I'm always happy to share some teachings and ideas which have been very, very precious to me. And as an homage and service to my teachers, I didn't invent anything myself. I'm no kind of philosopher or original thinker, but I've been fortunate, and I congratulate myself to have spent all these years with my teachers, and just as a tiny token of gratitude to convey a few bits of their wisdom, and it's one of the way I can repay their incredible kindness. So if anything unclear or wrong, please forgive me. And if anything useful, then maybe you can put it to use. But I remember when I was fortunate to translate for His Holiness the Dalai Lama, sometime at the end of a public talk, he said, well, if anything is good for that, please use it, otherwise just drop it. But please remember one thing, try to have good heart, and with that, you can have a good life for yourself and others. So just few thoughts on this Sunday morning from the forested countryside of France, as I had to leave Nepal since a few months to take care of my 98 years old mother. But anyway, the quietness of the forest is just as good as the quietness of the mountain. So I'm very happy to meet again some of you and meet those I never met and exchange these few words from this crazy monk. In France, they have this thing for share cars called blabla car. So I'm the blabla monk. So forgive me for any excessive blabla.
Matthieu, it's a real pleasure to listen to you, and thank you so much for your words and for your wisdom and for your qualities that we can all see and perceive. So maybe there are some questions from the participants. So in this case, if you speak English, you can raise your hand in the reactions bottom. You go there and then you see the icon raise hand, and then you can raise your hand this way and speak in English.
Quite neat. I never thought we can raise the hand electronically.
Yeah, we can raise the hand electronically. So there we have one. And so I'm gonna unmute you in a second, but for the others who don't speak English and want to ask a question in French, German, or Spanish, then you can write it on the chat, and then both my colleague Antje and myself will translate for Matthieu. Okay, so we have one question from Nadia. So Nadia, you can unmute yourself. Nadia.
Thank you very much. Hello. So my question is, how can we live our Buddha nature working in companies or in difficult environments where we are forced to act in a different way, Matthieu?
You mean when you are forced to act against your ideals or something? That's what you mean?
Yes, for example, working in companies, and I think a lot of people have maybe the same experience, where you have to act in a different way as your nature maybe would like to be or to react.
Yes. Well, of course, we may compromise, but at the same time, that compromise should be more like a diplomatic move to try to, without any, how do you say, without being offensive or aggressive or something, but be a catalyst for change. And that happens, people can become catalysts for change by not being stubbornly telling people what they should do or posing as the epitome of perfection and say, look at me, and you are not quite as good, but simply by the quality of what you are, the way you interact with others, sort of being honest, being clear, being transparent, being coherent, and at the same time to maintain your ideals without being, say, too rigid, but yet without without being also too weak. That means you can gently and peacefully be faithful to what you truly believe. So not trying to impose it on others, but at the same time, stay what you are. And in that way, hopefully, people might slowly, with the interaction, recognize that if someone who is always honest, frank, who is ready to compromise, to do some compromise without or concession without always be the systematically saying yes, but ready to listen. Some kind of all those quality, openness, listen, providing wise suggestion without aggressivity. Usually, with time, people appreciate that. It's people who is reliable, who is good ideas, who present those ideas without aggressivity or attaching too much ego to it. But of course, if you come and tell people what they should do, how they should be, and this is all wrong, usually people don't like that, of course, as you know. So anyway, I don't know exactly, but it seems that also we have been studies with conflict, and you need two hands to clap. So one hand you cannot clap. So if you're not in a mood to conflict, to escalate the conflict and all this, then somehow you are more of a pacifying effect than others. So I think try to be true to one's value while trying to do one's job. And if the whole thing is completely against it and there's nothing to do, if you are selling weapons, then there's not much you can do, yes, or tobacco, sorry to say. So then better change job. So I don't know, it's maybe easier to say than done, huh? Thank you.
So we have Catherine. Catherine, you can.
Yes. Good morning, Matthieu.
Morning.
What message would you convey to children so they would stay closer to their Buddha nature?
So I didn't hear the very beginning.
What message would you convey to children?
Oh, children, yes.
Yes.
Well, message, I don't know, but we know that as being a social species, although we can become very selfish, we can become psychopath, we can commit mass murder, all kinds of terrible things. But fortunately, now, contrary to what was taught, say, 50 years ago by quite a few, it now turns out that all the science and the studies of very young children show that although both state of mind are possible, yet they have a stronger predisposition for cooperation and for liking people who behave nicely to each other, rather than the opposite. So there are many studies showing that they are under 4 years old, they are very, very, almost 90% are cooperative. They prefer people who behave nicely to each other than the opposite. That somehow when you give them the chance to either give or to keep to other kids and you film them, they're much more happy and rejoice when they decide to give a sweet and keep it for themselves. So all these things shows that we have a stronger predisposition to goodness than not. Well, that's already a good start, because if it was the opposite, if as some were thinking 50 years ago, we are just selfish little brutes, and we just learn to behave after 5 because we know it works better in society, so that will be a lost cause. But if there is this potential, and then we need to help it to flourish further, widen. Like when they are 12 years old, children become more empathetic for children other side of the world, more in abstract way. When they hear of the plea of children in Africa or somewhere in Pakistan or somewhere, they suddenly become concerned by that. So that comes a little bit later. So this, to nurture that potential, is one of the best things we can do through a very loving, nourishing education, and also by the strength of the example. It's very well known that the young children who have been associated by their parents to, helping others, to some actions to help the elder, the poor, or to say, to go sometime, to go to, I don't know, to see other sick children and try to play with them and comfort them, that all that has a strong effect later on to become a good person. So there are many ways, with many studies. In the book I put together on altruism, I try to collect all those studies on the young children, how they grow that perception of cooperation and altruism, and on what could be, a more cooperative education, which is also a very good thing instead of competitive. So, there's a lot of things we can do. But as parents or relatives or friends, I think the best thing is to show example by try to be as much as we can a good person. And that's at least there's no risk of going wrong.
Merci, Matthieu.
So I think we have Antje, who is going to translate a question for a French participant.
Yes, I'm going. Wait a second, Nadia, it was just made a wrong thingy. So here you go. Okay, now we have a question on behalf of Mai. You can see here. Wait a second. Here you go. Sorry, Matthieu. So the question of Mai is the following. I've been teaching a school course in Switzerland for 3 years. The students, 60 per year, learn to meditate throughout the year. They have like 2 courses a week. Recently, I was surprised because I asked the students if they felt any benefits when they meditated. Most of them said yes. But when I asked if they were meditating during the week outside of class, most of them said no, or only occasionally. And then I asked, why that? And why, if you told me that meditating is good for you, why don't you meditate at home? And then the answer was laziness. So the difficulty of making an effort, as you said before, and to stay in the usual mental state, this was really is really a pity. So do you have an idea how we can help them to overcome this attitude, and how can we help them to make the right effort, like to cultivate mindfulness?
Great. But first, it's funny to have someone interpreting between 2 French persons, but why not?
It's just a technical issue. Otherwise, for the translation wouldn't work.
Yes, when it happened to me that I was taking to a teacher from Eastern Tibet, very old teacher who speaks a very strong dialect of Eastern Tibet, to meet the Dalai Lama, who speaks Central Tibet. He understands, but the older teacher who spoke only some kind of nomad dialect didn't understand His Holiness. So me, as a French person, I had to translate between 2 great Tibetan scholars. That was quite funny. So a bit the same. Yeah, so anyway, I think what you mentioned about the children, first of all, I think it's not surprising that they have benefits just by doing it from time to time, provided this is regular throughout the year, because it has a trickle effect. It sets something in motion. And if it was just once, then of course it will vanish very quickly. But if it's at least regular, like once a week or twice a week, even they don't practice, actually there's something going on, because it has triggered, it's like a small trickle of water, and it still go on. It doesn't completely dry, because I guess it stays in the children's mind, some kind of attitude. So they learn to change their way of, being with the world, being with their mind, being with others. And that's bound to have it's like a perfume. You open the bottle of perfume for 10 seconds, then you close it, but the perfume will stay much longer. So provided you open the bottle from time to time, close time enough, there's something of the perfume that will remain. So I guess that's why they feel the benefit, because you are reminding them every week of that, and that somehow stays in their mind. And it's, in a way, when you meditate every day in the morning for 20 minutes and then go to work, you're not actually meditating, but the effect of that 20 minutes still transform the way you act and speak, relate to others in the day. Of course, if you forget to do so for too long, then it's sort of like a plant where you stop watering, then it dries up and dies. So it's a matter of frequency, but we say that most important is regularity. So to maintain that. And so now when they, of course, they are young people, so they are quite active. But since they have already noticed the benefit of that, is hopefully many of them will somehow keep it integrated in their life. Many of the studies done, so-called longitudinal study, where you have subject doing something for 9 months or a year. And I know of 2 of them. Tanya Singer did one with mindfulness, loving kindness, and perspective taking. And recently, there's one in European project based in France called Silver Santé with elderly over 65 that for 9 months also did 20 minutes of meditation every day, or at least 5 days a week, and other group did learning English. And then at the end of those 9 months, they all wanted to continue somehow. They asked the teacher if they could keep in touch. So it set something in motion. So I think especially for children who are quite active, it's understandable that they don't sit and meditate. But somehow this will be something that I think that would stay with them. And then they will possibly continue or come back to it, because, to do something with discipline, you need to see the benefit of it. Otherwise, it's not like, a duty or paying taxes. When we were very young and we had the gymnastic class and we have to run, I mean, not every children enjoy running like that, or being pushed by the teacher to run quite a long time. But somehow later on, we see the benefits, physical benefit and mental benefit of physical exercise. So when we do it by ourselves, so at least you give them an opportunity to see the benefit of it. That would stay in their mind, and hopefully those who are inclined to that, they will take it up. At least they have seen it, they have known it, they have experienced it. So it is a great gift. So we can't expect that they sit all day long or every day by their own. Maybe it's too much asking for children. Ok, merci beaucoup.
Mais ils sont 16 ans, hein, 26 ans.
Sorry, pardon? Ok. Voilà.
So Daniela, or yeah.
Oops.
Hello.
Hello.
So I'm Philip and my wife Daniela. So recently I was in a hospital for the first time with something serious, and I received so much wonderful care from doctors and nurses. But what puzzled me, and that would be my question, is why do we pay so much more money for people, let's say, doing the organizational work, or brilliant doctors doing a diagnosis, but why don't we value the work or pay enough for people, I know, helping me to the bathroom, holding me, giving me the human touch? Where does this come from?
Yeah, that's mysterious. I mean, I've been myself to stay for some surgery for a week last July in Bordeaux, and they were so unbelievably kind. So at the end, I told them, unless you kick me out, I'm going to stay here. They were so sweet, incredible. And so that's very encouraging about human nature, and that should be valued. And recently, a friend of mine whose father is a great psychologist, one of the world specialists on happiness, at dinner. So he's passed away, and his son, got tribute from many friends. And one of the friends sent some flowers and some food to the people who were treating their friend's father in the emergency. And I thought it was so sweet that they did that, to think of, to do a gesture for those who were so kindly helping his friend's father to die peacefully. So I think, yes, goodness should be recognized where it is, not only through monetary incentive, but also to recognition. But I think the patients themselves know better than anyone how kind many of those caregivers and health workers and doctors and nurses. And I was amazed when I was there, in the night, they were taking shift. In the corridor, they were singing at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's amazing. Somehow, of course, some of them are burned out by, excessive workload, by this empathic distress. But somehow, many of them also find great joy in helping others, even in quite difficult conditions. So this is a tribute to human nature, and we should express our profound admiration and appreciation and take a lesson from that. Yes.
So I'm going to read out a question that is in the chat. Just one second. Okay, do you think meditation, the seeking for inner freedom, can also turn itself into an addictive behavior itself? And if so, how to avoid that?
I never thought of addiction to inner freedom. Well, this is a bit contradictory. You you cannot be tied up by freedom. But I don't know how we could become an addiction. Well, certainly meditation can go wrong if it turns to be an individualistic endeavor, sitting in the bubble of so kind of quietness and peace, and removed from all the troubles of life. And a friend of mine who is a bhikkhu said, tell the stories of the father at the breakfast with his 3 or 4 kids in the morning, and they all want to, interact with their parents. And the father sits there and says, please stop talking to me. I'm trying to eat mindfully. So it's sort of retreating in the bubble, the cozy bubble of, self-centeredness. So that's not freedom. That's not meditation. That's nothing. It's just like one of those. We have been fooled by hyper-individualism, and it doesn't work, because if you think like that, at the end of the day, me, you'll always feel miserable and makes miserable everyone. So, there's a minimum of understanding of what freedom means. It's freedom from habitual thinking. It's freedom from mental poison. It's freedom from excessive attraction, repulsion. It's freedom from an exacerbated sense of self-importance. So all those are causes of suffering. So it's freedom from the cause of suffering. So I don't see how you can have an addiction to that, because addiction is suffering. So if you're free from the cause of suffering, you should be free from any kind of addiction. And actually that gives a very great sense of lightness, because you are not tied up with all those ropes that pull you down. So you feel like a bird flying in the sky. I don't see why. I don't know. Anyway, if it's an addiction, I'm in favor of it. Teasing. Sorry, but frankly speaking, addiction by nature restrict your degree of freedom. So those are two, like heat and cold. So that means you have been looking for, if someone does that, he's been looking for the wrong kind of freedom. And I suspect it might be the kind of that teenager in England who said freedom is to do anything that comes in my mind. So again, a very, very, very self-centered way of conceiving freedom. So like everything, you know, what we call the view is to have the right understanding of a concept. And in Buddhism is very important, you know. So what it means inner freedom. Even emptiness can become a poison if you become attached to emptiness as being something, an idea, you have to grasp to it. So then this the medicine becomes the poison. So, well, if you understand freedom in the wrong way, it can become a source of entanglement. That's why possibly relying upon authentic teachings and teachers can clarify what is meant by inner freedom, which is to get free from all those automatic thinking and free from all what keeps the mind prisoner of mental construct and projection and fabrication. So then what else? You know, if you are really free, then that's freedom. There's no way to get addiction. You can enjoy it, but not being addicted. Addicted means you can't help doing something. That means you are prisoner. Yeah, I don't know.
So we have one question from Nelly. Which book would you recommend for meditation practice, Mahayana?
There are many. You see, meditation just in itself, I don't think we should be isolated from the path. I mean, that can be done in a secular environment, of course, because we're not. If we teach, you know, mindfulness and all this in hospital, of course, we can mix it with the you know, Buddhist idea or any kind of spiritual idea. It has to be secular. It's a tool that's very useful, but it's not Buddhism per se, but it comes out of it, but it's a useful tool. Now, within the Buddhist path, I mean, the meditation is just a tool, and like attention is a tool, while, for instance, developing unconditional love and altruism is more like a goal than a tool. So I think all those teachings which include mind training the mind or meditation, like the heart of compassion of my teacher, Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, is a very wonderful and profound combination of basic, you know, how to disentangle our minds from these mundane preoccupations, how to stabilize the mind, how to see clearly through the mind, and how to make the mind to become more compassionate. So that's more like a more thorough approach, not just meditation alone. Now, if you just want to train the skill of attentive presence and qualities, there are many wonderful books on shamatha and vipassana, and well, like The Joy of Meditation by Yonggi Migyo Rinpoche and others. Yeah, I wrote a small book on meditation because I had people keep on asking me, but it's not a reference, but it's just like out of usefulness based on the teachings. So yes, there are quite a few things, but yes, I don't know exactly which one to recommend. The Heart of Compassion of Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche is, if I had to take one book on the desert island, I would take that one.
Okay, so I think time is running out. We have Ariela, who's raised her hand, and then I think we have one more question in the chat, and I think probably we will not have time for more. Matthieu, what do you think? Okay, so Ariela.
Hi, Matthieu.
Hi.
I wanted to ask, in a lot of the Buddhist traditions and books that I've read, it mentions how important the teacher is to progress along the way. And if it's really for example, for people who are working full time and don't have so much access to many, let's say also from the Tibetan tradition, many teachers, what is the best compensation for something like that, or how can one maybe connect with a teacher in that sense?
Of course, there are many kinds of teacher. That the teacher who teaches the basics of the Buddhist path, the basic of the Dharma. Then there are the teachers who give refuge vow or bodhicitta vow of compassion. Then there's the Mahayana teacher who emphasize on compassion. Then there are, if one decides to go that way, which is by no way an obligation, but more like a well-taught choice. There's also the Vajrayana teacher. So each of those teachers are, there's different degree of engagement from the student and responsibility from the teacher. So as we go, it is the need for having an authentic teacher becomes even more important. So we should be very, very careful before. Not if it's just the basic, it's okay, but the more it becomes profound, the more we should be very, very careful to have the right teacher. Otherwise, it's like two blind people jumping in a precipice and a lot of suffering. So traditionally, we say we should look for several years, from far, then from close. If according to the teaching, and it's described at length, some text, like the Treasury of Precious Instructions of Jigme Lingpa, there's a whole chapter on describing what is an authentic teacher. But basically, a teacher and Buddhism should remove suffering. That's the goal. If it doesn't, it's not Buddhism, and the teacher is probably not the right one. Now, in terms of frequency, if we can have a teacher and visit that person often, that's good. But if it's a real, authentic, stable teacher, and we can build some kind of, at least a minimum of personal relationship, even if it's every few months or once a year, but we are really at that time getting the essence of what we need, then we can practice. But at least the connection is there. I mean, so one of my teachers, he was called Sangtra Rinpoche. He was a disciple of Digo Khyentse Rinpoche, but I also, of course, consider as one of my teachers. When he was practicing the Drupa Kagyu tradition. His teacher would give him 4 lines of Mahamudra every 6 months. So, but he had confidence, he practiced his best, and he would clear his doubt whenever he could meet his teacher. So I think at least find someone who is a good person, who is reliable, who has knowledge, who has compassion, who has no other agenda than helping, nothing to gain, nothing to lose, having more or less disciples, only concerned by helping the student, no other concern, no worldly concern, no personal gain, none of this, recognition or something. And even if we meet from time to time, it could be inspiring enough that it's sort of, we have this kind of, how do we say, we can refer to that in our mind as a place of refuge, a place of confidence, a place of inspiration. You know, if I think of His Excellency Dalai Lama, of course, I was fortunate to meet him on many occasions, but I never lived with him like I lived near Khyentse Rinpoche or Kangpo Rinpoche. But still, I have an immense inspiration from when I see him, and even watching some videos, it brings back his presence. So it cannot be only virtual, but at least if there's some human connection from time to time, and then you practice on your own, I think it should be possible even in our modern age. Otherwise, I think, yes, it will be difficult if we are completely disconnected from any teacher, and we just books and virtual things. There has to be some kind of connection. That's the strength of the lineage. There should be some kind of transmission, because it has been like that since the time of the Buddha. And the idea of a lineage, of a transmission, is important. But I think the frequency, If we can, it's great. If we cannot, I mean, we can certainly practice, by meeting the teacher time to time, if it's the right teacher and if we have the right attitude. Thank
you. So I'm going to read, I think, a last question from the chat. You tell me, Matthieu, we could continue for the whole morning, I think. But so as a coach, this is a question from Astrid. As a coach, one question that comes up again and again and also touches me is the question of life goals. What do I want to achieve? When I listen today, I have the impression that the question needs to be asked anew. Perhaps, how can we best serve the beings? Or what would be a good question with regard to inner freedom?
What would be what? Sorry? What
would be a good question with regards to inner freedom?
A good question.
So in the framework of working as a coach, what would be a good question for clients if the goal would be to achieve inner freedom?
Well, I remember telling a Western audience, of course, he doesn't make generalization, but he said that once. He said, here in the West, often you think you are free, but it's more like a screw in its all that is free to turn fast or this way or that way, but still it's in the screw, in the hole. So in that sense, there's a kind of, we feel we have a freedom to move a lot, but we are still within the sort of a screw hole of our habitual tendencies. And so in a way, I think the question to ask is how much we see in our day-to-day experience that we keep on, again and again, falling into our habitual tendencies that end up bringing frustration and unsatisfaction. And is it a desirable state? So to be honest, that we are a mixture of light and shadows. And the tendency for some people is to say, well, that's the way I am, take it or leave it is what makes me a unique person. But that's kind of, again, the giving up the race before crossing the starting line. So, okay, if it was not possible to change, then we better love ourselves as we are, our defects as much as our qualities, and then stop fighting against ourselves. But if, as it seems to be, and that Buddhism made the case for it, and neuroscience makes the case for it, that we can change, then it would be much better without tons of jealousy, tons of animosity. So if we're free from that, we're not going to miss it. It's not going to be a tasteless life. It's going to be joyful and free life. Someone like the Dalai Lama, who I'm confident has got rid of all those poisons, he's not at all like a zombie. He's the most lively, spontaneous, loving, sensitive person. So we don't become like a vegetable because we don't feel jealousy, hatred, and all this stuff. So to see that it might be much better if we could get free from those. And there's a possibility to do so. That's what mind training is about. And also that the foundation is of that possibility is because the mind, the deepest nature of mind, is not intrinsically stained by those. So there's like the light I was mentioning at the beginning. So there's a possibility for change. So then it's like we found out we have a little chronic sickness and there's a means to be cured from that, then why not? So it's to think about that, to think that not everything is perfect in our life, but that's not graven in stone. And I met someone once who said that I would not want to change anything in my life. So that's not very smart, I think, because there's so much things that are not optimal. And so why not try to bring them to a more optimal state? So to make a genuine assessment of where we are in life with this mixture of light and shadows, recognize the potential for change, that it is a good thing, good for ourselves, good for others. And then do what's necessary, which comes with cultivation and training the mind. So comes with effort, but those efforts are wonderfully rewarded by coming closer to that freedom. So I think it's a matter of being wise and have discernment and finding out the benefit of it. Otherwise, why should we do it? Yes, something like that.
So Matthieu, I would like to ask a question myself.
Yeah.
So when we look from the perspective of Tibetan Vajrayana Buddhism, so we look at the 5 poisons of the mind, the anger, the arrogance, and the envy, and all the poisons. And somehow we run the risk of actually getting into kind of a struggle with them. We kind of know that somehow we strive to get rid of them, you see? Mm-hmm. And in kind of wanting to get rid of them, they become like even bigger. Then you then realize, yeah, it's not about wanting to get rid of them, but just to actually get rid of the attachment to them, or to the grasping, to the fact that we are continuously kind of grasping to them, either by grasping or by wanting them to get away. You see what I mean?
Yes.
So could there be like another kind of instruction, or of another kind of being able to understand that? You see what I mean? That even though I know that from Vajrayana Buddhism there is no moralistic point of view in these poisons of the mind, I think in the West we take it like that, and we kind of want to get rid of them somehow. And I guess it's more about befriending them and accepting them and working with them, rather than not wanting to get rid of them. But getting there, sometimes it's kind of difficult when you hear the kind of maybe for the Western mind, and since you are a Western mind, have gone through all that, maybe you can say something about that.
Well, the goal is not to be overwhelmed by afflictive mental state. So now the method, the way, there are so many of those. So the notion of antidote depends on the kind of afflictive mental state. It depends on our present capacities. So, but the main thing is which one works. You see, there's no, if you have opened the door, it doesn't matter whether the key is made of iron, silver, or gold. We need the key that opens the door. A golden key that's not the right key for the door is useless. So likewise, in the Buddhist teachings, and especially in Tibetan Buddhism, there are a lot of emphasis on the different kinds of antidotes. So then what we need is not the top, like if we have a flu, we buy the most expensive medicine in the world. No, we need the medicine that cures the headache, not another one. So if the aspirin works, we don't need to buy a very, very expensive and rare antibiotic. So likewise, all those antidotes are described in the teaching. There are many, there's a lot of gradation. The toolbox of antidotes is very vast. And basically there are 3 kinds. One is direct antidote, say patience against being, blowing the fuse, loving kindness against animosity, and inner space of inner freedom against compulsive desire, all kinds of things. I mean, rejoicing as a direct antidote to envy and jealousy. So that's like heat and cold. So by growing one, the other one disappears. So that's one way. The other way is not to sort of identify with the mental state, like anxiety. I'm not the anxiety. I can watch the anxiety, and there's a space of awareness that is not anxious, that's just aware of anxiety. So that's another way. Another way is to analytical meditation, to see, yes, it appears the anger looks like a big thundercloud, but if I go into it, there's nothing to catch. So if I go into anger, I see it's empty of intrinsic nature. So why should it have such power on me? So this kind of finding the empty nature of anger. And then you can also use the strength of that emotion, like anger makes you very clear. So use that clarity before it becomes obnoxious, to stay in the clarity and let the obnoxious quality go. So all those different methods of either antagonism, seeing the empty nature, using the afflictive mental state to transform them, seeing the ultimate nature, all those are different types of antidote. The goal is the same, is not to be affected, and so that it translates into suffering. Now, which one is more adapted to our time, our circumstance, our level on the path? That's up to us to see, that's up to our teachers to tell us. But I think we can feel that some of them we are possibly too ambitious and that doesn't work for us, it's premature. Some are safe and works well, and it's work, it needs practice, but at least we are getting somewhere. So, I mean, in the teaching, you see all those array of antidotes. And again, there's not one that is better than the other. It's which one works wherever we are at the time where we use them. Something like that. Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Matthieu. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So thank you, everyone.
So yes, I think it's now we are over time, and Matthieu is very generous to stay with us, but I think we are coming to a close. I don't know if you wanted to, would you like to say a few words, Matthieu? Or?
Well, thank you so much. And I'm happy that to reconnect with the center. And I know, this gathering also good for everyone, be together. It helps the center a little bit. And also very kindly, you said you would also help our humanitarian projects. So just to let you know, since we work in India and Nepal, they have been vastly affected by the pandemic, but we managed to have an emergency relief. We help about 20,000 people, mostly elderly, handicapped people, day workers who really had no resources. So we are continuing that effort. Before the pandemic, we helped more than 350,000 people every year in India, Nepal, and Tibet. We don't know yet if our beneficiary would have increased or decreased this year. It's a bit confusing, but at least we are continuing our effort. And we have wonderful teams, about 200 people working in India and Nepal. So yes, so thank you so much for being part of it by your presence, and we're very great privilege to be able to serve others. And so thank you for your participation.
So yeah, it is my turn to say thank you to you, Matthieu, because you always respond so generously to our requests. So yeah. Matthieu and I met at the World Economic Forum before I was here at Landguet Ried and Rita International Center, and we became friends. We worked together, putting together very good, nice content that hopefully impacted the elite of this world for the better. That was our intention in any case. And it was an utter privilege to work with you and to have become your friend and to be in contact over the years. And so Matthieu came here on the 14 and 18. And when I called him this time, because of the times with COVID, it's been difficult for our center. We have a big land center in Bern in Switzerland. So he immediately said yes. And so as Matthieu mentioned, the benefits of this online talk will be shared with Karuna, the humanitarian organization, and our center. I've just shared the website link of Karuna. If you want to take a look, I'm sure that with these times, with the situation in India, the funds will be used very wisely, as Matthieu was mentioning. So again, thank you very much. He also has a wonderful book on meditation for those who were asking. He's very humble not to mention, but it's called The Art of Meditation, and I highly recommend it as well. So yeah, thank you, Matthieu.
Thank you, Begonia. It's lovely to see you again, and will be at least virtually connected to the center, a beautiful place.
Yeah.
And I hope one day we can again be joyfully together in that countryside and near Bar, and see you, all of you, and wish you all the best. Thank you. Take care.
See you. I've just put a little bit of everybody in gallery, so you see.
Okay.
Thank you very much to our wonderful translators as well. We have Geneviève, Rinchen, and Helen translating. So all my gratitude to them as always. And thank you everybody for participating.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. If you want to unmute yourselves and say hi.
Merci.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Saludos. Muchas gracias. Gracias por la traducción. ¿Qué tal estás? Feliz Día de la Madre.
Merci, merci.
Vielen Dank und tschüss.
Ciao. Ciao, everybody.
Dankeschön.
Tschüss.